My friends, Israel will soon start ground operations against Hamas militants in the urban area of Gaza. And we can only fear the worst for the Palestinian civilians living there. The Battle of Gaza will be bloody. Actually, there have been 7 battles of Gaza between Israelis and Palestinians since 2005. So the upcoming Israeli offensive will be their 8th attempt to put down Palestinian armed resistance. I think there are some key points to analyze regarding Israel's Operation Iron Swords. The most important one is that from a military perspective, it will be much harder than you might think, and tactical challenges await the Israeli Defense Force in Gaza. If Hamas prepared for the defense of Gaza the same way it did for the attack on Israel, then the Israeli military may face serious problems. Wow! Alright boys, let's skip foreplay and go straight to the point. Currently, one of the most important factors that could complicate the IDF's mission in Gaza is the situation on its northern flank against HZB forces in Lebanon. Over the years, HSB has developed a well-trained and well-equipped military force of at least 30,000 heavily armed and ideologically driven fighters with years of combat experience. We can only assume the Lebanese to be only waiting for the Israeli army to get bogged down in the urban warfare of Gaza to launch their own ground operations somewhere in the north, perhaps in the area of the Sheba farms, Avivim, or Metula. In this case, it will be hard for Israel to manage a war on 2 fronts. For now, we're only talking about skirmishes, but these could quickly escalate. And in my opinion, we could see the beginning of some shaping operations by the Lebanese. For example, on October 15th, an Israeli base at the Lebanese border came under fire from ATGMs, MRLS systems mounted on pickup trucks and mortar shells. And then shortly after, HZB forces also managed to target the crew of a Merkava tank, which ended up causing at least 2 fatalities. Meanwhile, the next day on October 16th, they actually managed to damage yet another patrolling Merkava. There are also reports that the Lebanese are targeting sensors and cameras located all over the border between the 2 countries. That could definitely be one of the reasons that could explain the current standstill of the Israeli army and their reluctance to storm Gaza right away. With that being said, I think the Israel Defense Force's biggest weakness lies in its inability to take losses. How many casualties is the IDF willing to take to achieve its objectives? This phenomenon started in the 1980s when the existence of the State of Israel was not in jeopardy anymore. During every military campaign, ground operations were eventually stopped after Israeli troops reached a certain threshold of casualties. And this also explains why they often resort to airstrikes. The first example is during Operation Peace in Galilee in 1982 in South Lebanon. Yani, after initial success, Israel faced stubborn resistance in Beirut against the Palestine Liberation Organization and its allies. Although Israelis besieged the PLO, they feared the casualties of a head-on assault and street-to-street fighting. Eventually, the IDF started pulling back its military forces after it suffered 654 KIA in roughly 4 months. When Israel went for round 2 and invaded South Lebanon again in 2006, it took 121 military fatalities and over 1,200 wounded within a month for the Israel Defense Force to give up on its operation against HZB. And we know Israel didn't succeed in its mission because on Wikipedia, the outcome says inconclusive. The last example is the 2014 Gaza War. Typically, when Israeli forces entered Gaza, they would not lose more than 10 soldiers KIA. And that was already considered to be a lot. But in 2014, within a couple days, they suffered 67 military fatalities and another 469 wounded. That's a battalion gone! And Israel withdrew its forces claiming it had reached its objectives. and that they made sure HMS would not be a threat anymore.
Fuck.
In 2014, the Palestinian HMS faction deployed between 2,500 and 3,500 fighters to defend Gaza. Now the situation is completely different. The scope and scale of the recent atrocities have pushed the Israeli population to demand an offensive that would end the militant group once and for all. According to Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant, in other words, with Operation Iron Swords, Israel is not only preparing a counterattack, but a punitive expedition. On top of that, due to the heavy losses they just suffered, Israeli soldiers are angry and they want revenge. I saw a video of IDF soldiers showing no mercy to 4 Palestinian insurgents that had openly surrendered. We can only expect the worst once these soldiers enter Gaza, and the Palestinians know this. Take a look at what the Washington Post wrote. Israelis getting bogged down in the messy unpredictability of urban warfare. This time the IDF will not only face 2,000 to 3,000 enemy fighters, but they can expect the Al-Qassam brigades to deploy all of its 40,000 combatants. And the battle will be brutal because the Palestinians have their backs against the wall. HMS is going to fight to the end to defend their only stronghold in the world. Even worse, with no other alternative than the impending total destruction of Gaza, the entire Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip will form ranks behind HMS. On Twitter, there was this post showing Palestinian teenagers getting military training. So once again, we can expect every male over 16 to join the fight. That means 600,000 possible combatants. Realistically, not all of them will fight. There's not enough weapons for everyone.
When the one with a rifle gets killed, the one who is following picks up the rifle and shoots.
But the Israeli military could face, 150,000 men at arms, who will not only be fighting to protect HMS, but they will fight to protect their homes and families. The ground forces of the IDF represent roughly 126,000 active duty personnel. Yet, this doesn't seem to be enough because they keep delaying the offensive. And spoilers, it seems Israeli projects casualties to be significant, since it has already called for backup. Here from Reuters, Israel drafts 300,000 reservists as it goes on the offensive. Overall, we're talking about 500,000 Israeli troops. That's enormous for a population of 7 million people. And these units have been flocking to the south of the country where more and more armored vehicles are taking positions around Gaza. Yet are these reservists combat ready? Or do they need time to be retrained? Is it why ground operations keep getting delayed? Another reason seems to be that the IDF doesn't have enough military gear like bulletproof vests, helmets, and knee pads for all its reservists. A theory confirmed by the Times of Israel. Reserve soldiers complain that equipment is lacking or substandard, which is understandable since this is the largest call-up in the country's history. Oh yeah, and some people online believe that Israeli Special Operations Unit will simply go in, fight the bad guys, and get back all the hostages. Achi, this is not Hollywood. This article from the Times of Israel revealed the following about the first day of the attack on October 7th. According to some accounts, the Israeli Air Force helicoptered into Be'eri 2 platoons of its Special Forces Shaldag unit. But apparently they were overwhelmed by the insurgents. Fuchs said about 90 insurgents entered Be'eri at about 7 a.m. on Saturday. 2 hours later, the Shaldag detachment of about 20 troops landed, but within a short time, the force was eroded. That's a military euphemism to say that they all got KIA or wounded. Now imagine fighting HMS on their home turf against fighters that have spent their entire life in Gaza. The battle could be like a Middle Eastern Iwo Jima, heavily fortified positions with bunkers, tunnels, and booby traps everywhere. plus the smell of cigarettes, garlic, and pollution. For real, we've talked about it in the previous videos, but Palestinians